Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin just sat down together in Alaska, and the world is already feeling the shockwaves. The official story is peace in Ukraine. That's only half of the truth, perhaps just a quarter. What really happened behind closed doors could change Russia's and Ukraine's future, and everyone else too. Today, I'll share my takes on what went wrong with that meeting, what the real results of the meeting are, and what will be the fallout. Howdy, howdy, everyone. My name is Konstantin. Welcome to Inside Russia, where usual Russia is explained by the unusual Russian. As usual, you will not find any propaganda, BS, or lies. Instead, you will find plenty of truth, common sense, and logic. And some emotions too, and there will be quite a few today because it's a very emotional topic, very large topic. It's taken me quite a lot of time to get things together, to study, to analyze, to think, And this is what I will talk of today. How I will structure my meeting. There is so much information I want to share, and I want to make it as easy to digest as possible. First, real quick, I want to remind you what I expected of this meeting. Second, I will share my opinion on what really happened before the meeting started. Third, I will comment on the press conference. Well, basically on the results voiced by both presidents, the results of the meeting, real results. And fourth, I will show you how Russia is celebrating this historic day. And fifth, I'll share my disgust with the mainstream media and their coverage of this event. And sixth, I will share plenty of my takes on everything in between. But first things first, I will not turn the live stream chat on to discuss things live today. This is just a live stream without the live stream chat. Too of a controversial topic, and I'm very saddened by all fighting that usually happens when America is discussed. I try to avoid discussing it altogether, always, but sometimes it's impossible, as there are things that America does that affect Russia directly. And this is what I discuss. And as you remember, I was very skeptical of the ceasefire or peace or whatever. But it happened. I did not expect a ceasefire as the result of the meeting. I made 2 videos recently, just in the last few days, discussing the upcoming meeting. In the first video, I forecasted there would be no result, ceasefire, and I gave 2 reasons for that. First, Zelensky, by law, can't gift any land to anyone, and even if he wanted to. And obviously, Russia is demanding some Ukrainian land. And the second reason I gave is there was no preparation done before the meeting. In the second video, I revealed 2 secret reasons why Putin was going to Alaska for. One reason is tour de force, and the second is economic bailout. Why did I know? Well, Putin doesn't need the ceasefire now at this point. The ceasefire would put him into a disadvantage. He needs all or nothing. But he certainly needed to go to the USA. That's one thing he always was looking for in all his years. Now, does Ukraine need ceasefire? Ukraine needs peace, ceasefire, whatever. Ukraine needs to stop the bloodshed. That is very, very straightforward and very understood concept. Okay? Um, Vladimir Putin cannot afford to stop the war. That's a secret, that I'm telling you. Because if he does at this point, that without getting everything that he wants and selling it as his huge victory, for example, so much of Ukrainian land and so forth, then he will simply be dismissed from the office one way or another. So he cannot um, agree on any ceasefire with anyone. Now, what he needs is to show everyone that he is the strongest wolf in the pack in Russia. And then, obviously, he needs to lift up the economic sanctions. Um, anyway, that was my point. I made 2 videos recently, and they're doing very well. If you haven't watched them, check them out. I'm going to put links right here for these 2 videos. So, solidifying power in Russia and bailing Russia economically, the 2 reasons. Another reason, very red flaggish reason, is that his team he brought along with him, definitely not to negotiate ceasefire. The money people. All right. So this is what happened. This is my take on what actually happened before the meeting, what I thought the meeting would be. And again, please check out the videos. Now, those were my thoughts before the meeting took place. Now, let's move to the second part, actually, how the meeting was organized. First of all, Alaska. Why Alaska? It makes perfect sense out of all places in the United States. It is adjacent to Russia, so there is no absolute risk for Vladimir Putin to fly over international waters, international territory, other countries. Basically, he flies from Russia straight into the United States. If you look at the map, USA and Russia are the 2 closest neighbors. Okay, and on top of that, Alaska is a historical Russian land. Yes, Russia sold Alaska to the USA, I believe it was 1864 or 1867, not too long ago. Then, makes perfect sense. Okay, if he is to fly to the USA, that would be Alaska, right? Now, few large planes brought tons of reporters and equipment prior to the meeting. The planes were flying for 2 days prior. 500 visas were issued to Russians as a part of this delegation. Now, I find it extremely odd, and I voiced my concerns in the videos that I made in the live streams. This ceasefire negotiation, if it was really ceasefire or peace negotiation, should have been an in and out thing with just the presidents and perhaps 2 or 3 people along with them, 1 military person and couple diplomats. That's it. Well, it didn't happen like that with Putin. He brought his entire entourage, 500 people. And the most important part of that entourage was propaganda. They flooded Alaska Anchorage and they started doing their job. They started filming. Well, first of all, they started complaining of the accommodations. They didn't like them. Obviously, it's not Moscow, but that's courtesy of US taxpayers. There's simply not enough hotel rooms in Anchorage to host everyone. So Americans were nice enough to give Russians place to sleep, and then they started complaining about not having their credit cards and debit cards not working in America. Well, you know what? Surprise, surprise, that's how the international sanctions work. Welcome to the real world. Now, the amount of reporters was huge, and the question is why they needed so many if It was just a very quick ceasefire talk, in and out. Why hundreds and hundreds of reporters flooding Alaska and, filming something? Now, good question. Then Donald Trump landed in Alaska in his Air Force One, very impressive plane, by the way, and he gave a press conference right from the inside of his plane, and he said a very important thing. I want you to notice that. He said, we need ceasefire. We are here for the ceasefire. I will know in a couple minutes if the Putin is serious to negotiate ceasefire. If there's no ceasefire, then there will be consequences for Russia, but ceasefire. We need to stop the bloodshed. Then we can work everything else out later. But we need ceasefire. We need to stop killing people. So many people are dying. It's a tragedy and so forth. He said it inside Air Force One before Putin's arrival. Moreover, Donald Trump seemed very energetic, very fired up, not tired, not upset. He was fine. He was actually prepared to negotiate. And then Putin landed in the USA. Well, I actually couldn't believe they put the red carpet in front of him. Overall, I mean that wasn't Russians. It was the Americans put the red carpet in front of Putin. Overall, throughout this meeting, Vladimir Putin was treated as the guest of honor. Then Trump and Putin got out of their planes simultaneously, which was, I guess, a good thing. And Trump greeted Vladimir Putin with applause. I want you to show this.
Yeah, there you go. The handshake between the two men. Well, wait, was
delayed?
Applauding.
Okay.
3 times he applauded. And then there's a handshake.
To real coverage. They're both going to walk together. A nice handshake and greeting. The president was clapping for Putin. A lot of this is about stroking egos. And both of these men have a huge ego. So the fact that they agreed, or Putin agreed.
No. Handshake. Applauding Putin 3 times, small applause, then the handshake. Now, then something unexpected happened. And I absolutely loved, I don't know whether it was Donald Trump, his advisors, but then I myself salute and applaud the Americans who did it. A surprise was waiting for Putin, and a very good one. First of all, Putin got out of his plane, and there was a very long walk, and he had to walk by the jet fighters, the new ones. Pretty mighty powerful planes. And then something unexpected happened right here.
And that these meetings should be productive. But of course, we won't know how productive the meetings are going to be until after.
Look at this. And you see, look at this military servicemen on the left, the Americans, and they're greeting Putin as the guest of honor. And look. Oh, I absolutely loved it. I loved it. Check this out. This was the jewel of this entire so-called peace negotiation.
Yeah, I'm guessing some fighters flying over Elmendorf up there in Alaska. Symbolic of some of the strength.
Very symbolic. Very symbolic.
That's what we're looking at.
And Donald Trump actually showed to Vladimir Putin
уже до рукопожатия, конечно, большое оказало впечатление на Запад.
And this is Russian
Russian
propaganda. Well,
Главное,
Russian media.
То, что все те
You could see.
ковровой дорожки, то, как Дональд дружественный, то, конечно, здесь главное это надежда на.
They show the handshake, and I think they showed a little bit of the planes. I think I didn't catch it. Anyway. This stealth bomber, the one that was used in Iran not too long ago, to deliver the bunker busting bombs flew accompanied by fighter jets right above Vladimir Putin, and Donald Trump showed him. And look, Vladimir. And I think he mentioned something, look, they hold in the bunker bombs. And, I loved it. I loved it. Anyway, I just want to let you know that I was watching everything on two screens. One screen was Newsmax 2. That's it was translated in internet and on YouTube. That's the only American media I found it translating the whole thing live continuously. And another screen was Россия 1, Russia 1, Russia 1. That was also a news channel, and it has a website, and anyone can go and actually watch what they have to say. They were doing live translation, the same picture, but they had very different commentaries, completely different. Dry facts from the Americans and incredible flattery and joy from the Russians. Russians were portraying as if it was a magnificent visit of the Russian president to the United States. They were saying things like, Americans are outraged that Donald Trump met with Vladimir Putin in one of the warehouses. And Россия 1, Russia 1, quoted an obscure American who said that. Okay, it was not a big deal, someone's personal opinion, but they blew it up out of proportion. Like Americans are protesting Donald Trump. He should have greeted Vladimir Putin someplace adequate for Vladimir Putin's status. But that's okay, Putin can, we deal with that. The main thing is the meeting and discussing and so forth. Americans, very normal broadcasting. I mean, you saw it, right? Some of you watched it. Normal, discussing facts, and Russians' emotions over the top, It was actually very interesting to compare both screens. Another thing I noticed right away, in front of our eyes, there was normalization of Russia and Putin. Normalization was happening. It's little details. It's the whole idea of Putin flying to the USA. It's the whole idea of having, things like having red carpet in front of him, shaking the hand of Donald Trump. There's so many Russians in Alaska, Just, it's normal. I mean, it's okay. The two countries meet each other. The picture was as if a normal leader of a normal peaceful country was visiting, a foreign country, was paying a friendly visit. Nothing extraordinary. Let me remind you something. Over a million people killed. Cities and towns destroyed. Ukrainian economy in ruins. Russian economy in the worst crisis ever in existence. So many people killed and maimed. So many people's lives are broken. So many orphans. So many widows. One man's decision. And that is Vladimir Putin. He is nothing of a regular leader of a peaceful country. He is wanted. There's a warrant by the International Criminal Court for him. Okay? And he was being greeted with applause. He was being, his hand was shaken. Russian reporters were mingling with the Americans. Normalization, that's what it's called. Now, another very important thing to notice, peace. Peace was everywhere. On the American side, that's all they talked about. Peace, peace, peace. We want peace. We want ceasefire. The deal needs to be made. The deal will be made today. There's some kind of a deal. There will definitely come up. There will be peace. This is the peace summit in Alaska. All over television, all experts, the ceasefire will be negotiated. Donald Trump will press Putin into agreeing to some kind of a ceasefire. Now, that was one screen. Another screen, Russian screen. Friends, Russians didn't say one word about peace. Literally, not one word. It was mostly Putin is visiting Alaska to reestablish US-Russian relations that unfortunately were broken. Putin is negotiating with Donald Trump to discuss the current geopolitical situation. Vladimir Putin is discussing Russia and the USA need to start cooperating economically. This is a visit to discuss many things. Not one single word about peace. Moreover, as the summit was taking place in Alaska, fierce bombing was being carried out while Putin was shaking Trump's hand, while he was walking on the red carpet, while he was negotiating, while he was in the USA. Fierce bombing was carried out. The Ukrainian cities were rained with death. That's a big difference. Very huge contrast. It just struck me. Another historic moment was that Putin desired so bad that moment was, it's actually the moment, the handshake. Again, I will return to that. Donald Trump applauded and shook hand of Vladimir Putin.
Yep, there you go. The handshake between the two men. Well, wait, was that?
Was delayed. I think
that
it
was
now.
Right there. They're shaking hand. Okay? And this is, like, you can see that's how Americans basically, discussing this. Okay, this is a handshake between the two presidents. Okay, they met for the first time since a long time, and so forth. Basically, dry facts, no emotions.
Okay. Well, now I think we're back into real coverage.
We're back into the coverage, people walking around.
Greeting. The president was clapping for Putin.
President was clapping, applauding,
This is about stroking egos. And both of these men have a huge ego. So the fact that they agreed, or Putin agreed.
Now, I want you to watch what Russians were saying about this very moment.
Уже до рукопожатия, конечно, большое оказало
The handshake.
впечатление на западные СМИ.
The handshake gave an incredible the handshake impressed incredibly all the Western media,
В том числе и на американские СМИ.
including the American media.
И, конечно, то, что
And now, look, they're showing CNN, Russia, Россия 1, Russian channel, translating CNN, showing the picture of CNN, and they're saying, look, Trump shaking Vladimir Putin's hand made an incredible impression on the Americans, and they're discussing it.
на которые были потрачены долгие годы.
And then, those attempts and so much money that have been used to destroy Russia's reputation and isolate it from the rest of the world.
Большие бюджеты о том, чтобы выставить
Huge
Россию в качестве международного изгоя.
But huge budgets have been used to make Russia look like the pariah, the international pariah. They failed.
О том, что с Россией никто не хочет переговариваться.
Those budgets were spent to show that Russia is pariah. No one wants to negotiate with Russia. And then look at the picture that they're showing right now.
Они, собственно, разрушились вот в эти секунды, в те самые секунды, которые видел весь мир на красной
All
ковровой
those
дорожке.
attempts, all those money to make Russia look like pariah, they were destroyed in that single moment of a handshake on the red carpet.
Трамп аплодировал российскому
Trump was
президенту.
applauding,
Конечно,
clapping to
производит.
Russian president, and this is it. This is to show the world that all those attempts failed. Russia is not isolated. And this is him saying that, okay? That's the text behind this
Большое
picture.
впечатление. Если же это дружеские России государства, дружественные, то, конечно, здесь главное это надежда на мир, надежда на возобновление.
If it's, and for those countries who are friendly to Russia, there's more hopes for peace, more hopes for continuing, relaunching the cooperation.
Конструктивных отношений на возвращение, на полное возвращение России в том числе.
So that's going to be. There's a hope for Russia to completely return to the world scene, to the world economy. Now, this is what happened. A very symbolic, a very historical moment, and this, I think, one moment that Vladimir Putin wanted to have, and he got it. The isolation was broken by the handshake. Russia is normal country again, welcomed to the world stage by the USA. Everyone will follow, obviously, okay? The USA, the example is set. 3-year long efforts to isolate Russia, broken by one handshake. That's exactly what Vladimir Putin. That is his moment of triumph. That's what he wanted. I'm paying so much attention and so much time to it, so you will understand the importance of this moment, okay? The triumph. That was the quintessence of his visit, the triumph of Vladimir Putin in Alaska, the handshake. Now, jumping a little bit ahead, nothing after that handshake has happened, but I'll get to it. After they left, there was a lot of broadcasting on both sides, on the American side and on the Russian side. And again, I was watching both screens simultaneously. I was just turning the sound on and off at different screens. American broadcasting was actually normal. It was cautious. It was anxious to hear the good news, and everyone was hopeful. Oh, they are negotiating now. Donald Trump is the master of the deal. He is making a deal with Vladimir Putin right now. He's negotiating a ceasefire, as he said just minutes ago, being inside the Air Force One. Now, that's what the Americans were talking about. Peace summit, peace agreement, ceasefire. Russian side was absolutely different. Joyous. Celebrating. Happy. Alaska is the Russian land with loads of Russians living there. For about an hour, Russia 1 was giving reports about how Russian culture is preserved in Alaska, how so many locals speak Russian. So much reporting. It felt as if Alaska was populated by Russians and Russian language was spoken there everywhere. That's the picture that they made everyone to believe in Russia. Alaska is Russian land. Yes, we sold it, but you know what? The Russians are still there. The churches are still there. The popes of the Russian church are still there. The icons that we pray to, they also pray. They're the same as us. The Alaskans, it's incredible, and they all, it was surreal. They all spoke to people who actually speak Russian.
Mutual respect, and that these meetings.
That's like this guy.
Не было лицензий, не было новых месторождений.
Демократы не давали.
Ну, в общем-то,
It says that no licenses and things like that. Yeah, they spoken to this local guy, and they're telling his story. Russian motorcycle he has in Russia, and then how he has Russian books in his, in his trunk. In
Мне он нравится. Мне нравится, потому что это очень уникальная и интересная техника. Внучка обожает кататься на этом мотоцикле, садиться в коляску.
You see that picture in picture? They were showing the conference room. Do you see that science is pursuing peace? That's, I don't know how to say it softly, but it made me just looking at that sign made me feel not very well, because I knew that I was watching the news feeds. I knew that they were bombing the Ukrainian cities at the same time. So anyway, they showing this guy, and then they were showing other families and how they run business, small businesses. It's just regular people. And this is a Russian motorcycle called Ural. Before the conflict on Ukraine, there were lots of motorcycles. These motorcycles sold in Russia, and all of that. So they made Russians believe that Alaska is populated by Russians a great deal. And at the end, they mentioned very quickly, like it's not a big deal, that 1.5% of Alaska population is ethnic Russian. And they didn't say anything about how many out of those, that 1.5% speak Russian. I think that they picked the families that they speak Russian, okay, not too many of them, but they made it look like Russian language is spoken everywhere. All the people who they interviewed spoke very broken Russian as second language. Just this guy on the motorcycle, he was saying something in Russian, but then he didn't feel comfortable. He switched to English. But Russian propaganda made Alaska look like it's dominated by Russian culture and language. Now, this is incredibly important, what I wanted to tell you. Out of all stream, if you remember this stream, if you remember one thing, I want you to remember this. Russia has a new enemy. I don't know if anyone else has seen it, but it's a major shift in Russian propaganda. I noticed it yesterday, and I start seeing it today. Very, very important, friends. Before, the special military operation in Ukraine, that's how they call the war and the invasion, was started to fight the West. Not Ukraine, but the West led by the United States of America. Russia was never in war with Ukraine. Russia was in war with the West. And the USA is the leader of the global West. I had been hearing it for over 3 years. For a couple weeks, they were telling people that the real reason of the special military operation was to denazify and demilitarize Ukraine. But then that narrative simply vanished very fast, very quickly vanished, because it doesn't make any sense. Demilitarize a sovereign country, to denazify the country where the president is Jewish and there's so many millions of Jews live there. It doesn't make any sense, right? So they dropped the narrative, and it took them to come up with a new one, and they did. And that was the war with the collective West, led by the USA. Russia was, in fact, in the war with the USA. That was until yesterday. And the narrative changed. The conflict in Ukraine, and I'm using exactly the same words Russian propaganda is using now. The conflict in Ukraine was provoked by the previous administration of the United States of America and by the Democrats. This message was fired from every angle yesterday. I couldn't believe my ears. That was a major change. An example, let's go back to this motorcycle guy and this ethnic Russian in Alaska who owns Ural motorcycle, okay? Now they're saying, thanks to the Democrats, American Democrats, he doesn't have access to the parts because all the trade with Russia has been halted and, Russia is under the sanctions. So this wonderful ethnically Russian man is forced to pay $200 for a small part that costs peanuts in Russia. He would have paid a few dollars if the United States was free to, was trading with Russia. And I'll show you again.
Потому что не было лицензий, не было новых месторождений.
Ну, демократы не давали.
He goes, there were no licenses, no, no permissions. He goes, because the Democrats didn't allow. And he goes, well, yeah, you could say that.
Ну, в общем-то, да.
He was set up there, very skillfully set up by the propaganda, by the way. And then they're showing his motorcycle.
Ворона, которому все чаще разорвали не российскую экономику, а и вопросы. Санкции Байдена и Обамы вплоть к предыдущей администрации тоже есть.
No.
В последнее время
Okay.
приходится доставать бардачок с инструментами.
So he says he fixes his own motorcycle often.
Его Урала к предыдущей администрации
So there are questions to the previous administration of the United States.
есть вопросы. Санкции Байдена и Обамы
The Bidens and Obama's sanctions that were placed on Russia
разорвали не российскую экономику,
destroyed not Russian economy,
но российский мотоцикл.
but his Russian motorcycle.
Мне он нравится. Мне нравится, потому что это
And now he tells how he pays so much for a small part from Russia. Because, he's basically there are companies in Russia that circumvent sanctions. I mean, I'm sorry, in the United States.
иногда не очень.
Sometimes not good, sometimes okay.
До санкций 90% продукции ирбитского мотоцикла.
So, and then they tell him how the Democrats destroyed everything for America. You see, that's. Now, I heard this exact message, and Democrats, how Biden's administration, how Democrats harmed American economy by disallowing it to trade with Russia and so forth. And so basically, that's the fault of the U.S. Everything is the fault of the U.S. Democrats. It's their fail. They forced Russia into the armed conflict. It's their fault. Without the Democrats, Russia would be peaceful. If not for them, Russia would never attack Ukraine. I want you to remember that, because I'm going to be talking a lot about it, and the Russian propaganda is going to be this basically the new message they have. Just a few minutes later, I will tell you how Putin confirmed it. He basically said it himself. Now, another thing that I noticed is the meeting itself was in 3x3 format, meaning 3 people on the side of America and 3 people on the side of Russia. It was supposed to be one-on-one, Putin versus Trump. But then something went wrong, and I don't know who changed it, most likely Putin, and it became 3x3. It was a disappointment for the Americans, but you know what? It was joy for Russians. The Russian propaganda was showing it as normal. That's what it was supposed to be. All planned. Was great. Now, this is part number 2 of this live stream, of this message. I just told you what was happening while the negotiation was taking place. Now, I want to emphasize one thing. Americans were eager to hear the good news, the deal. Deal, peace, ceasefire, agreement, Donald Trump making deal with Putin, blah, blah, blah. Russians, they were showing how they were in America. That's it. Peace, Ukraine, not one single word. Now, before I jump to the results, to the part number 3 of this message, I actually want to take this opportunity to thank you. You watching me right now, and everyone who is a part of Inside Russia community. Thank you for watching, liking, commenting, interacting. Thank you for messages, your prayers, and for your love. Thank you for coffees that you buy me at buymeacoffee.com, for Patreon, PayPal. I promise you that despite being demonetized by Google and not earning anything from this channel, I continue my stand against Russian government, against unfairness, against the war, and I will continue to tell you the truth. You have my word on that. Thank you, friends. Third part, the results. The results of the meeting. That was interesting. Now, when Russian side, Russian propaganda, well, I'm saying Russian propaganda, but that's the Russian TV channels. They are owned by the state. So it's Russian channels, and at the same time, they say what the state wants them to say. Okay? Russian channels didn't say anything of what's going to happen in the meeting. Trump meeting Putin, greeting him and hosting him in Alaska was good enough. Nothing mattered any longer, okay? Americans, they had hopes, and the hopes were discussed, and the plans were discussed. And the plan was to hold this meeting from 6 to 7 hours, very long meeting, which kind of makes sense if you really talk about peace negotiation or ceasefire. When you have a lot of requirements, wishes, when you have to compromise a lot, you have to have your experts, military expert on your side, your foreign minister on your side, things like that. And you have to really work. That's how the negotiations work. And Americans estimating 6 to 7 hours is just spot on. Now, Russians didn't estimate anything. They're meeting. They're going to meet for as long as whatever. The meeting took place 2 hours, 45 minutes. Not 6 or 7 hours. Under 3 hours. And the results of the meeting were voiced at the press conference. Both Putin and Trump made speeches, and it basically clarified everything. Now, I would like to pay attention to the setup. Two equal leaders standing next to each other. There's one wall, and there is, and I'll show you right now. Let me show you. Okay. Do you see that picture in picture, the small one? There's one stand for Vladimir Putin, another stand for Donald Trump. So they are equal, the same size, right next to each other. The message that this setup translates is two equal countries came, the presidents, the leaders of two equal countries came to meet and negotiate and discuss. They are of equal power and might. Now, I want to know who did this setup, who did this conference room, the Americans or the Russians? I'd be very surprised if the Americans did that, because it looks like the Russians were involved, okay? Okay, again, Russians didn't say peace once, and I don't want you to forget that they were bombing Ukraine at the time of the talks. And then you can see this big peace summit right there. Peace summit. Nice peace summit, just fantastic peace summit. Now, I want you to see something. We were waiting for some time, and then again, I was going back and forth. On the American side, there were analysts talking about the geopolitical situation, former diplomats, former CIA agent. The guy who interviewed me in one of the podcasts was there on Newsmax. So, familiar faces. I actually emailed that guy afterwards, said that I liked his analysis, okay? So, I think it was Mike Baker. We were waiting and waiting and waiting, and then I was looking at the Russian propaganda, showing Alaska, showing all these wonderful things, kind of like happy, celebrating videos. And then I got the answer. Even before Putin and Trump got onto that stage, to those stands, the answer was on the faces of Russian officials. Now, let me remind you, there were a few people with Vladimir Putin. He didn't bring the main negotiator, Medinsky. He brought his economic advisors, the economy guys, the money guys, okay? And then there was a Russian reporter. He saw the members of the team coming into the room first. And I don't want you to listen to their words in Russian. Just look at their faces. Kirill Dmitriev. Now, what do you think? This is Putin's envoy to Donald Trump. He traveled to America 3 months ago. He gave a big interview to Fox News. Harvard graduate, one of closest Putin's daughter, one of Putin's daughter closest friends, in charge of a large investment agency in Russia. Look at this guy. Do you think he's not having a good time? He's not happy? No. This is Russia's Minister of Defense. But he is the money guy. He used to work at Gosplan, and basically until last year, he had been one of the chief economists in Russia. And then they ask him, how are you? What happened? How's your mood? And he goes, excellent, excellent. The mood is excellent. Look, do you find him happy or what? Anton Siluanov, Russia's Minister of Finance, 2 days ago or 3 days ago, Vladimir Putin summoned him to the emergency economy meeting in Russia. He was sitting right next to Elvira Nabiulina, and he was looking horrified, morbid, like one of his close circles, people died. And now, look, in Alaska, he's in a completely different mood. Look at this guy. That's after the meeting with Donald Trump. They're laughing. They're, all is well in the kingdom of Russia. Oh boy. I saw the faces of the members of the Russian team, and I understood everything. Again, that meeting lasted 2 hours, 45 minutes instead of from 6 to 7 hours. And there was another conversation with a Russian ambassador to the United States, and I want you to see that. And he spoke volumes. You read between his lines, between his words.
Видели что-то за кулисами, почувствовали вы что-то там? Какая атмосфера, какое настроение?
How is the mood? What do you feel about this meeting? Like what's going on in the United States?
Атмосфера в целом позитивная.
Because this is positive mood.
Конкретно итоги мы сейчас услышим из первых уст.
Everything like the results we will hear right now. Everything like the details we will hear right now.
Как вам в целом здесь работается сейчас?
And how in general do you work in America? How is it in general?
Есть ли какие-то подвижки с точки зрения дипломатических вот этих вопросов?
Are there any diplomatic advancements, improvements?
Но мы стараемся.
We're trying. We're doing our best.
Больших прорывов нет и, видимо, быть не может.
We're having big problems right now.
Стараемся, но прежде всего.
We're trying. First of all, the most important for us, the priority is the visa regime with the countries, with Russia, the United States with Russia.
Вы сами видите, что
You see what's going on there. I don't have to tell you.
перемены происходят
It's really bad. It's...
очень медленно.
Ведь
Есть два других крупных вопроса возвращения.
And then the second largest question is returning our property.
Де-факто конфискованные.
The US government has confiscated some properties that belongs to Russia in the USA, like a few facilities.
6 объектов
6 facilities,
дипломатической недвижимости,
6 pieces of real estate.
без чего в решении прочих вопросов
Without bringing the assets back, these facilities back, we can't move any further discussing other stuff.
затруднено. И второе, наша инициатива, мы считаем, она способствовала бы нормализации, реальной нормализации, это восстановление прямого авиасообщения между.
And then the second, this is our initiative. We feel it's going to be hugely important for normalization of our relations is returning flights to Russia, American flights to Russia. So we're connected by air.
Нашими странами.
Пока никакой реакции на эти
There is
предложения.
no reactions.
Есть, мы подготовили документы,
We have prepared that proposal to the American side, he says.
российской стороны свои варианты, они обсуждаются. Я надеюсь,
It's being discussed,
что президенты дадут, ну, собственно,
and then I hope that the presidents, will allow for that.
надеюсь, после этого саммита, после
I hope that after this summit, these questions will be normalized. The properties will be brought back to Russia, given back to Russia, and then the flights between Russia and the USA will be reestablished.
импульс ускорится с этой работы.
Now, please forgive me for emotions. I was extremely emotional yesterday after I was done watching this so-called peace summit. I'm a little more calm now, well, a great deal more calm. Yesterday, I was going to, influenced by emotions, I was thinking of starting live streaming right then and just erupting with emotions. But you know what? I know better not to do it. So, looking at this, guys, I still have a wave of anger raising inside of me because Russian ambassador to the United States is saying that there are three big problems right now, biggest problems between the two countries. First problem is visa situation. Russians cannot get visa normally because the US embassy in Russia does not issue visas. Second problem is 6 facilities, 6 probably houses or business centers or whatever, 6 pieces of real estate were confiscated by the US government. Now, I remember it was done with Obama, 2014, when Russia annexed Crimea. The first sanctions were placed, and those facilities were actually the result of the sanctions. And number 3, there are no planes flying between the United States and Russia. These are 3 biggest problems between the USA and Russia, according to Russian ambassador. I was listening to those guys. I was watching them, listening to them speak, and I had this feeling that there's a huge elephant in the room, and no one was talking about it. The war, Russia is waging a war in Ukraine. No, it's not a big deal. It's the 6 facilities. Until Russia, somehow resolves that problem, it's not going to move any further. It's the planes. They need to come back flying between Russia and the United States again. That's the problems. Russia being the pariah, well, it's not anymore. Vladimir Putin is handshakeable again, and the Russian propaganda is openly saying that. Okay, it's not the case any longer, right? So, but all these things that Russia has done, they're not the big problems. They're not nothing, There's 3 big problems, and that comes from Russian ambassador. Oh boy. I hope that everyone gets what they deserve at the end. I really hope so, Now let's get to the press conference. Vladimir Putin spoke first. Putin looked incredibly happy, and he didn't say anything certain. Only general stuff. He usually does that. He does that in Russia, and he did that yesterday. And some of you might have seen the press conference, and you heard him speak. General stuff. It is very unfortunate that Russia and America have countries have so much in common, such a great and rich history together, but their relations have been placed on hold. it is very unfortunate, that despite having such a history of economic cooperation and friendship, our countries are apart from each other now, and so forth. Three things I found extremely important in his speech. Now, the biggest elephant in the room, he mentioned Ukraine only once. And then he didn't say that he came to Russia, to Alaska, to negotiate the ceasefire or peace. He mentioned briefly that the conflict in Ukraine has to be resolved somehow. And that was it. Wow. Now, the second thing important is that Russia and the United States of America need to relaunch, reestablish economic cooperation. Oh, that is the big problem. Now, that is already elephant in Putin's room, and he needs to talk about that because Russian economy is falling apart, and he needs U.S. aid as soon as possible and as much as possible. He simply cannot survive with someone helping him. The United States of America, of course. And the third thing, Putin clearly said that it was the fault of the previous administration and President Biden, the fault of the Democrats that Russia attacked Ukraine. The fault for Russia attacking Ukraine lays on the shoulders of the previous administration and President Biden. If not for them, Russia wouldn't have attacked. Now, remember I said earlier that I was I was watching Russian propaganda talking about Alaska, and I was very surprised noticing they were saying Ukrainian conflict, and they were saying it's all Democrats' fault. Biden's fault, Obama's fault, previous administration's fault, Democrats. 4 words, terms they used. And then Vladimir Putin comes up to the stand and he tells exactly the same thing in very sharp, unambiguous words. They all started talking about Democrats. And Putin nailed it, kind of. Now, he made a shocking statement. Ukrainians are brothers and sisters to Russians. They are the same populace as Russians. And it's a tragedy that has happened. And again, that tragedy is on the shoulders of Joe Biden and his administration. Imagine the level of Vladimir Putin's cynicism. Wow. Then Donald Trump spoke. He seemed incredibly upset. He clearly said, "We don't have the deal today. Nothing. We should speak more. It was good meeting Vladimir Putin here, and we should continue negotiating. It might take us we're in the beginning of the way. It might take us a few more steps." He was brief. He didn't take any questions. That usually doesn't happen. Donald Trump usually takes questions. You know it better than I do. Very unusual. And he quickly left along with Vladimir Putin. Now, remember, they were scheduled to go from 6 to 7 hours, then have a meal together. Well, guess what? No meal for Putin and his team. They were kicked out. Not offered meal, lunch, or whatever, and they were off. And Putin rushed to his airplane, Russian Air Force One, and he was off. And Donald Trump was very upset. Now, I saw John Bolton, a former, I think, security advisor, anyway, the politicians, the first Trump's administration official. He made a comment that he found Donald Trump tired, extremely tired, but not angry. And I disagree. I found him angry, very upset, not so tired because, hey, it's only a couple hours of negotiating. He was 2 hours prior, he was doing absolutely fantastic, giving speech at Air Force One, And, he couldn't have been tired of 2 or 3 hours after that. It was clearly him being upset. Now, this was how the American media and Russian media were showing after the press conference. The Americans were shocked. I was watching Newsmax. It's a Republican media. And the host was not upset. He was shocked. He didn't understand what happened, how it could happen. They kept on saying it wasn't even a press conference. What was that? We don't understand. That's very odd. And Russian media, it was delighted. They acted if this result was expected, and that was the goal. They acted as if everything went absolutely fine.
That it would be a little less challenging than it's been.
I want you to show the Newsmax. The guy on top is obviously the host.
We are after a summit and still no answers. And I didn't see the frustration on Donald Trump's face during that brief news conference, but he has to be frustrated if, after all of this, he still doesn't have a deal with the Russian president.
Well, look, he's offered 2 significant ceasefire proposals, and those proposals were met with barrages of ballistic missiles and drones against hospitals, schools, and neighborhoods. Last night, while Putin was preparing to get on the plane, ballistic missiles were launched at Ukrainian cities. So Putin is continuing to tweak.
Robert Wilkie, former Secretary of Veterans Affairs.
And I think that's what has turned President Trump in terms of what he sees that Putin actually is, and the way he has been very aggressive in pointing to the world that he can pull the trigger and really break what's left of the Russian economy. And I think one of the more underreported stories, Rick, is just how deeply in trouble the Russian economy is. I mean, we're now talking about interest rates that are well over 20%.
Oh, no kidding. No kidding. Really? That's the biggest story now, how Russian economy is in troubles, in deep troubles, and wow, incredible. Thank you, fella. I'm sorry, I got so emotional. I was filming this. I couldn't screen record, so I just took my phone and I was filming it, and I was ready to scream, okay? So I'm very sorry for my emotions flowing.
Oil continues.
Thank you very much.
Plummet in terms of its value.
You must be watching Inside Russia a lot. The economic reviews every Wednesday. You're speaking my words.
Because they're just not going to be able to make book if Urals oil.
What really got me upset was, I was saying this for over 3 years. And then a lot of experts, if not all, in the West, in the United States, were relying on some kind of freakish information. I don't know what they were getting from Rostat or whatever. And they were saying the official stand was, you know what, Russian economy isn't doing that bad at all. It's circumventing sanctions, everything's fine, and it appears to be, Russian economy appears to be growing and all of these things. And I kept on sitting here and telling otherwise, saying, like, show me your data, what are you doing? The latest thing, The Guardian, an article in The Guardian about 10 days ago about Russian economy full of incorrect information. I'm going to do a debunking video of this article, okay? I have the article, and they still doing it, but now at least there's some sense returning, and they start paying attention to how Russian economy doing not so well,
Oil falls below $40.
Oh, no kidding, really? It's only taking you 3 years to figure out?
We're going to continue to follow the story.
You smart
Obviously,
people.
Robert Wilkie, we really appreciate your time so much on what we thought would be a historic night, perhaps not as historic as
you should go to school again,
but
buddy.
it's not over yet. And we're not done here either. So we will continue our coverage of the summit between Trump and Putin. And
unfortunately, I didn't catch the host. He seemed not upset, but he seemed very, very confused. And he said, well, he was talking to one of the speakers, and he said, well, why, if Putin came to Alaska with empty hands and he had nothing to negotiate, why did he come to Alaska at all? And this is exactly what my video of 2 days ago is about. 2 secret reasons why Putin went to Alaska. Because he just needed to land in Alaska, to stand on Alaskan and US soil and shake Donald Trump's hand and be greeted by the great nation. And the United States is the strongest country in the world and the great nation. Yes, that's exactly why. I just don't understand why these people, highly paid, with all the information, resources available to them, why they just don't get it. Russians, as soon as the press conference ended, it was funny. Russian, Russia 1 TV channel, they just said the end of the press conference, and they turned some kind of movie on. No analysis, no experts, no hosts, no one. It felt like, well, our job was done here, so we're off. If no deal, then why Putin came to meet and to discuss? Really? You don't know that? Well, you should do your homework. And it didn't come just from this attitude of this gross misinformation about Russia and about Russian and Putin and his desires. It was not just unique to the hosts. Donald Trump and his advisors actually did a very lousy job understanding what Putin wanted from coming to Alaska. There was another interesting conversation, dialogue between the host and another expert. Another expert that was the other expert online, and unfortunately I couldn't film him fast enough. But he said that what happens if Putin tries to manipulate Donald Trump in the future? Donald Trump, will do such and such, but what happens if Putin tries to manipulate? And buddy, he just did. He pulled out one of the greatest manipulations of his presidency. He's come on top. He returned into the world stage with a big bang, and he set up the Americans, so he did it with their own hands. Anyway, the last thing I want to speak about is, and it's probably not going to be a very, very popular topic here on YouTube and in this video. It's probably going to anger a lot of people, but I want you to listen to me and think of what I'm going to say. I am pretty disgusted with the Western media. Not just Western, Russian media as well, Russian propaganda. I watched the Newsmax, then I watched CNN a little bit. Newsmax is a Republican media, CNN is Democrat media, and Russian media belongs to the state. There are no parties, just one party, the United Party, the state. And the Democrats were putting so much dirt on Donald Trump. he was evil. He did all the mistakes. He did all the wrong moves. And they discussed it every single second. The Republican media, Newsmax, did completely opposite. Donald Trump did everything right. Donald Trump did a fantastic job. It was a right decision to bring Putin and so forth. So the left and the right. The left are black, the right are white, or vice versa, And there was no one in the middle. Not one expert, not one host. Newsmax disgusted me because there was, by one episode, there was one episode of protesting in Alaska by American people. And that's what free people do. They protest. They get out to the streets, and if they don't like something, they peacefully protest. The key word here is peacefully. They assemble, make themselves heard. And then a lot of people came up to the roads in Alaska, and then they were holding the Ukrainian flags, and they were chanting things like, Putin, go away. And that is the right of free people. And then the host on Newsmax, Max News, whatever, he was ridiculing them, saying, oh, look at them. Most of those protesters are citizens, senior citizens, have nothing to do. And then most of them in canes, and, and I'm pretty sure that the Democratic Party put them together somehow. They weren't senior citizens with canes, but he was downgrading them. And I heard that happen so many times in Russia. It's disgusting. Okay, even if they were senior citizens, what's wrong with that? What senior citizens don't have a right to get out on the street and protest? Okay, people with canes cannot protest. So I didn't like it a lot. Not one person, not one expert criticized Donald Trump. And at the same time, on CNN, and I watched another Democratic media, not one single expert or host actually said something nice about Donald Trump. And you know what? I kind of liked him in this whole meeting. Let me explain why. I mean, I don't really care about Donald Trump much. My personal opinion is my personal opinion, but I tell you what, he kept on saying the same thing that I was saying. Let's do the ceasefire. Let's stop the bloodshed. I pray every single day, and I say exactly that. Dear Lord, please help Ukraine. Stop the bloodshed. Reach out and touch the hearts and souls of those who are responsible, so they wake up from their lethargic sleep, realize that they're human beings and there's still love in their hearts, and they will stop the bloodshed, the fighting, and the killing. And that's what Donald Trump was saying. And this whole peace thing was so different from what I heard from Russia, from other countries. It was peace. It was, let's stop the fighting now. And then somehow we will sit down and we'll start negotiating, whatever. But let's stop people getting killed. Now, I was naive of Donald Trump because he clearly didn't understand who he was dealing with. Now I think he does. But at the time when he was inviting the peace conference, this peace summit, I just like the idea. I give them the credit for that. Okay, not single person in the room in the Democratic media gave him credit for that. That was very human of him. Now, not single expert or host in the Republican media criticized Donald Trump. And guess what? There's a lot to criticize Donald Trump for in this meeting. Okay, so it's not like it's black or white. There's shades of gray. But then American media, and then I don't watch it that often and that much. I usually watch reports on something, but this time I watched it continuously for hours, and I saw incredible isolation. Now, this saddens me. This really disgusts me because that's not right. That reminds me of Russia. There is no alternative opinion in Russia. It was, years and years ago, but not any longer, because the state has eradicated the possibility for people to have alternative opinion. And in the United States, it's a free country, but these people do not voice alternative opinion. They have this one narrative, and every single one is either likes Donald Trump a lot or dislikes him a lot. No one says, okay, he made a mistake, but this is where he did good, and I think he did. Okay? I like the fact that now things at least started moving. Yes, Vladimir Putin, Donald Trump made a big mistake inviting Putin to Alaska. Okay? I told you. I've told my opinion so many times already, and today I also told you. But I think he did a great job by reaching out and freaking meeting him. And he should have met Putin on a neutral territory. Let's say Abu Dhabi would be perfect. And Donald Trump made a mistake by allowing this huge entourage of Russians, hardcore propaganda people, come to Alaska and rape it informationally, okay? That was a huge mistake. But actually meeting with Putin was the right thing to do, okay? And he should have brought two people on his side in one plane, Donald Trump, and then he should have made sure that Putin would do the same without reporters, without anyone. In and out type of thing, in Abu Dhabi, in any other country that they would agree on, in Iceland, whatever, But no one has done that before, and Donald Trump actually did. Now, he made many mistakes on the way, but his intentions, I don't know what drives him. Perhaps he wants to get Nobel Prize, but you know what? If he somehow promotes peace in Ukraine, let him have Nobel Prize. I don't care, okay? What I care is the blood of the Ukrainians and Russians for that matter, because, blood is blood, no matter whose blood it is. So it needs to be stopped. You Americans and Europeans, you deal with the Nobel Prize and Donald Trump, but just get it stopped. At least promote, at least do something, okay? And if diplomatic ways don't work, well, press with the sanctions. Destroy the economy. Do something, okay? So I do give Donald Trump this credit. Okay, other things, Donald Trump is Donald Trump, but this is what I wanted to say. I really don't like that there is no alternative opinion. At least I didn't see it. Perhaps there are other outlets, I don't know. Let me know down in the comments. I'd be really happy to actually find out more about that. But so far, I watched Newsmax, I watched CNN, the HuffPost, and it's anyway. To finish this live stream off today, I would like to tell you that there are serious concerns. The results of this meetings, well, what are the results, okay? Obviously, the peace deal was not negotiated. The ceasefire was not negotiated. It was not reached. Russians came there not to negotiate the peace deal. Donald Trump promised many times he would apply economic pressure, sanctions pressure onto Russia. And if the ceasefire was not agreed yesterday. Now, ceasefire failed, and today Donald Trump switched from his position that ceasefire needed first, and then everyone would sit down at the tables and negotiate, to now we need the peace agreement. That's position of Vladimir Putin. He wants all or nothing. The peace agreement where there's lands that are not occupied by Russia right now are given to Russia, part of Donetsk and Lugansk provinces of Ukraine. And the lands that Russia is controlling would be given to Russia. So the border would be at the front line. That's all or nothing, my friends. And that's what Vladimir Putin wants. I am very concerned that American president is, talking about that. And we'll see what happens next. To sum up, Russia has been legitimized. Vladimir Putin's been legitimized. Russian media is celebrating. There's an unofficial holiday in Russia. Everyone is joyous and everyone's doing fantastic there. Russia is back to the world stage with a big bang, and Vladimir Putin is the legend now. He is the hero of Russian people, the savior of Russia. And it wouldn't surprise me if they would start calling him Vladimir the Great in the future. Thank you so very much. Please keep on tuning in. I will see you tomorrow at another live stream with another message. Carthago delenda est.